Hi guys, welcome back to this week's live stream with me, the early show live stream with me, Pastor Jinai. Just give me a second while I get set up real quick. Whilst I'm doing that, guys, say hi and do let me know where you're tuning in from and how your week has gone, what have you been up to, and all of that stuff. Also, fingers crossed, I've actually been able to resolve this week's technical issues. If there's anything wrong with the internet, I'm sorry, I can't help that. That's a community-wide thing. But otherwise, let's get started once more people join us. Good morning, Joyce. Good morning, Penny. Hi, guys. I hope your week has gone well. Yeah, hope your week has gone well. What have we been up to this week? I went down to KSK. I went down to KL yesterday to help out with Kachar Soup Kitchen. So that was interesting because on the route that I was doing, I think we had like double the number of recipients. Normally we have between 40 to 50 recipients. Yesterday we had 90. So that was quite a lot of people. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us before we get started on this week's topic, which is, I'll leave it to later. Unless you guys have actually read the description, then you know what we're going to be talking about today. Yeah, so Baltimore. Is it still cold in the States? Because I keep seeing pictures online, Joyce, of like people saying that it's still snowing in some areas, which to me is completely insane given that it's now April. Yeah, so what else has been happening this week? Like we've been doing some work related to Rinpoche's outdoor relic stupa, and we'll be continuing to do work on that over the upcoming weeks. And next week, we will be doing some work in relations to Kachar Soup Kitchen's food bank, which is starting up in Bentong. So that will be fun. Just give me 1 second before everything goes wrong. Okay. It's still snowing in April. Jeez. Wow, okay. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, you know what? Let's get started anyway, since it's 10:03. Thank you guys so much for joining me this week's live stream. Today, I thought that what I would talk about is how to deal with instability and how to deal with crisis. Given what is happening in the world around us these days, and how quickly things are changing, how fast everything seems to be moving, and how new issues seem to crop up every single day. Like literally just before this live stream, I was reading some news about how India is now moving into, I believe, the second wave of infections of the pandemic, and that many people are affected, many people are suffering, and at one point, I think it was 3,000 people are passing away every single day. So yeah, things are moving incredibly quickly these days, and new issues seem to be cropping up every single day. So I figured that this week, if we were to talk about how to deal with instability and how to deal with crisis, it might have some relevance for us at this time. So as usual, my plan is to keep this sharing a little bit on the shorter side so that we can get through as many of your questions as possible. If you guys do have any questions, please put them up in the description section of in the comment section of this live stream, and I will try to get through them. And if I don't manage to, then I will respond after the live stream. Also, a big thank you to the sponsor of today's live stream who wishes to remain anonymous. So thank you very much. They would like to dedicate their sponsorship towards all beings' liberation from suffering and attainment of compassion, wisdom, and true happiness. So thank you very much for your support of these programs, not just mine, but everyone else's as well. If you would like to sponsor a show, there is a link in the description section of this live stream, so please click on it if you would like to show your support. Good morning, Suzanne. Hope you have had a great week and a great weekend. Yeah, so thank you very much for joining us this morning. All right, so dealing with instability and dealing with crisis. Sorry. Here's the thing, I'm actually having 2 cameras running at the moment, just in case one fails because the internet here isn't that fantastic, so I can swap over. And it's kind of disconcerting to see me like moving at a slightly delayed speed on one of the screens. So anyway, dealing with my own crisis. There are different types of instability. And today, or some examples of instability are, for example, instability of situations or instability of even people, right? But for today, I'm only going to talk about instability of situations because I want to make it easier for us to focus on the topic and to understand it. And if we were to address other forms of instability, such as instability of people, instability of practice, instability of emotions, and so on, that is a different matter, and it will take us much, much longer to cover that particular topic. Good morning, Sarah. Thank you very much for joining us today. Hi, JC. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, for those of you who are just joining, those of us, I've been here. For those of you who are just joining, please leave them in the comment section, and I'll get to them after the live stream. So let's talk about the characteristics of situational instability and how it leads to crisis, in the sense of how situational instability leads us to feel and their sort of qualities and their results. Situational instability is scary because it leaves us with a feeling of being destabilized, as though we can't deal with the situation, or as though we're unable to cope, or we're not equipped to deal with what's happening around us. And situational instability, in such instances, we can't predict what is going on, or what's going to happen, or what's going to happen next. And we feel like we can't predict people's reactions, or we can't predict people's behaviors. And that unpredictability and that uncertainty is, for most people, very destabilizing and can be very scary. So as a result of this, situational instability has a negative connotation. And the reason for that is because it's seen as the opposite of stability, which is painted to be a positive thing. But what is situational instability at its core? Situational instability at its core means something that's changing, something that's in flux, something that's moving, and it has elements of unpredictability within it, and it is characterized or includes elements of erratic changes. So in essence, in other words, another word for instability is impermanence. So when we really look at situational instability, what about it really frightens us? If we really boil it down to its essence, to its crux, to the foundations, we reduce it down to its most basic level. What really frightens us about situational instability is actually impermanence. And that fear of impermanence comes as a result of us not understanding impermanence, or not having realized impermanence, or not having internalized the teachings on it, or not having accepted it, still denying it, or in some cases, with some people, still trying to fight it. So doing their best to fight the truth of our existence, which is impermanence. So how we can learn to deal with situational instability and crisis more effectively, actually, is to meditate on impermanence. And I know that for people, it's going to sound like a cop out, or it's going to sound like oh, I've heard that before, like, or something that's like, yeah, like you've heard before. But if instability is actually impermanence, the best way that you can deal with it is by understanding how it arises, and understanding that impermanence is the truth of our existence, that our existence is characterized by impermanence. So meditating on impermanence, therefore, can become a very, very powerful practice, because it reminds us that things are always changing. And it also trains us into letting things go, in being able to let go, in not clinging. In not clinging, for example, to an idea that things are supposed to be a certain way, that things are supposed to be stable, that things are supposed to be unchanging. So when we meditate on impermanence, and we understand, and we realize, and we have internalized the truth of our existence, which is impermanence, that will help us to become more effective in dealing with situational instability, in dealing with crisis. When we understand that instability is part and parcel of life, or of existence in samsara. When we realize and we accept the truth of impermanence, which is what Lord Buddha taught, then we won't be surprised when things go wrong, and when we won't be surprised when there's a crisis that crops up, and we won't be surprised when things are unstable, or when things are always changing. All right, so before I continue, let's take a quick second to see who else has joined us. Good morning, Nishan, Angeline. I'm going to call you Angeline. Good morning, Keng Hoi. Hi. Good morning, Eleanor. Um, Thank you guys so much for joining us today. All right, so today we're talking about instability and we're talking about how to deal with instability and crisis. So the first thing I just shared about for those of you who have just joined us is that um, instability, another word for instability is impermanence. That things are always changing, that things are always in flux, that things are impermanent. And if we meditate on impermanence, if we meditate, we understand and we realize and we accept the Buddha's teachings on impermanence, and that we internalize that the truth of our existence in samsara is impermanence, that will make us much more better equipped, help us to be much more better equipped to dealing with changes, to dealing with crises, to letting things go, letting go of the idea that things are supposed to be fixed, that things are supposed to be stable, that things are supposed to be predictable. And that it will help us not to be surprised when things go wrong, because things are supposed to go wrong in samsara. And that is exactly what His Eminence Khenso Rinpoche Jampa Yeshi said to our Rinpoche, Sem Rinpoche. His Eminence Khenso Rinpoche was the ex-abbot of Ganden Shatse Monastery and also the guru of our guru, His Eminence Sem Tugu Rinpoche. So Khenso Rinpoche said to our Rinpoche, why are you surprised when things go wrong in samsara? You should be surprised when things go right. And what Khenso Rinpoche was explaining is that things will always go wrong, that we will always be subjected to crisis, and that we will always be subjected to instability, we will always be subjected to change, because we are still subjected to our karma, because we are still beings living in samsara. We're still taking rebirth within samsara. And that is the same thing as what our Rinpoche taught us, which is that things in samsara will always go wrong. That is its nature. So don't be surprised when they do go wrong. So another way of becoming better, becoming more effective at dealing with instability and dealing with crisis is actually to meditate on karma, meditate on the reasons why our existence is not stable, why things are always changing, why we are always experiencing crisis, why we're always experiencing situations where things are unstable, which causes us suffering, why we will always have things go wrong in our life, why we will always have things in our lives which we cannot predict, which are unexpected, right? So someone who is surprised by instability and someone who's surprised by crisis is basically a person who is denying that karma exists, who is denying the fact that karma can come to fruition at any time, for things to go wrong or for things to not go according to plan. All right. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to quickly say hi to people who just joined us. Good morning, Kawe. Good morning, Jean. So thank you for joining us this morning. All right. So yeah, meditating on karma, meditating on the reasons why we experience instability and why we experience crisis, the cause of it. And that if we're always surprised when things go wrong, we're actually denying karma. We're actually denying the fact that karma can fruition at any time for us to experience this instability. So meditating on karma and understanding karma will really help us to deal with situational instability and crisis much better, because we understand the causes of it. And so when it happens, it doesn't throw us off kilter, it doesn't destabilize us. We feel more in control and we feel more equipped. We have better ability to deal with something if we understand that if things don't work out the way that we want or the way that we expect, we did the best we can. Meditating on karma doesn't just make us better at dealing with situational instability or dealing with crisis, but it also helps us to understand that how we act now, how we presently act now, is actually creating the causes for us to continue to experience this suffering in the future, whether that future is within this life itself or whether that future is in a future life. So when we meditate on karma, I'll say it's a twofold benefit, but it's actually many morefold benefit. But in this case, within the context of this topic, it's a twofold benefit. It has the benefit of us understanding and not being surprised when things go wrong, because we understand that there's a karmic basis for it. It also helps to prepare us and to realize that the actions and how we react now and our behavior now, our body, speech, and mind now is creating the causes to continue to experience this suffering in the future, whether that future is within this lifetime or in a future lifetime. And that is one of the 3 types of suffering that Buddha Shakyamuni actually talked about, which is the suffering of change. So when we meditate on karma, we understand the Buddha's teachings much better. And that also brings us to another way of becoming better at dealing with instability or dealing with crisis, which is to manage our expectations. What is a crisis? First of all, what is a crisis? A crisis is when things don't go the way that we expected, or things don't go the way that we planned for. Despite our best efforts, they don't go according to plan. All right. So by managing our expectations, by adjusting our expectations, by meditating on impermanence and realizing that our expectations are going to shift from time to time, and that if we hold on to it, it's going to create a lot more suffering for us. We, in this way, become better equipped to deal with crisis because we don't expect for things to go our way. We don't expect for things to go the way we plan. We don't expect for things to go exactly as we have attempted to predict. So how can we understand this much better? We can understand this much better in terms of crisis management, which is when things go wrong, how can I best mitigate its effects? So managing our expectations is how can I best mitigate its effects? And there's 2 types of crisis management. There is crisis management from a secular approach, right? Which is like, there's like crisis management courses, right? People go to learn how to deal with crisis. I remember there was one short talk that I went through, one seminar that I went through on crisis management, actually, long time ago. And what they talked about was how airlines manage crisis. What is the worst case scenario for an airline? The worst case scenario for an airline is a plane goes down, right? And there is loss of life. So how airlines prepare for this is they already have pages or text press releases written up ahead of time that they can fill in with the necessary details and then release it when there's a tragedy. So there is a secular approach to crisis management. Now, there is also a spiritual approach to crisis management, and that is the ultimate form of crisis management because you're actually preparing way ahead of time by removing the causes, by reducing the causes, by addressing the causes for why things may possibly go wrong in the future. And the spiritual form of crisis management, if you want to put it that way, is actually related to our practice. So if we want to properly manage crisis, if we want to properly manage situational instability, or learn how to create the best basis for us to experience less instability and to experience fewer crises in the future, knowing that things are unstable, knowing that things are going to be unstable, knowing that we are still subjected to our karma, all of this should in fact prompt us to practice more, should in fact prompt us to commit more deeply to our practice. So when things go wrong, stop, take a breath. Instead of freaking out and instead of letting our emotions take over, instead of letting our, like getting on this runaway train or getting on this wild elephant or whatever analogy you want to use, instead of, bulldozing our way and then panicking, stop, take a breath, meditate, and think. What I'm experiencing now is the result of my karma. What I'm experiencing now is the result of karma that I have created. I am at the mercy of my karma. I'm adrift in a sea of karma. And the reality of my existence is impermanence. The reality of my existence is that I have no control over my life, and whatever control I have over my life is merely perceived because I'm still subjected to my karma. And the reality is that despite the fact I may perceive that I have control, ultimately I have no control over things that happen. Ultimately, I have no control over my death. Now, when you meditate on that, is it scary? When you think about that, is it scary? It is. I mean, the reality is that it's scary, right? Because it's scary because for people like us, we really genuinely have no control over our rebirth, over where we're going to take rebirth, over when we're going to die. If we were someone who had attainments, if we were someone who were practiced, if we were someone who were fully committed to our practice, if we were someone who were holding our vows, our tantric vows, if we were someone with perfect samaya with our gurus, right? It's not going to be scary. Knowing that it's not going to be scary, but for people like us, ordinary people like us, of course it's going to be scary. But the question is, it may be scary now, but does it have to remain scary? Does it have to be scary forever? And the answer to that is no, it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be scary if we practice, if we actually do something about it. It doesn't have to be scary if we use our fear of instability, if we use our fear of impermanence, if we use our fear of uncertainty, of unpredictability, of crisis, if we use that fear and we direct it towards doing something. If we use that fear energy to do something, then it becomes empowering. That fear becomes empowering. There is a very fine line between fear and between empowerment. And that fine line is actually what we do with the fear, what we use that energy of fear to accomplish. Because remember, fear is an energy. Just like how desire is an energy, just like how anger is an energy, just like how jealousy is an energy, all of these things are energies that can be directed, that can be redirected towards accomplishing something, towards accomplishing a beneficial result for ourselves, for our practice, and for other people. And it's up to us to determine what we want that fear energy to result in. What Rinpoche taught us is that fear is potent. And I'm sure you may have seen this quote circulating. Fear is potent when it motivates us to make changes for the better. And that's what I mean by this, is that when we fear instability, when we fear crisis, when we fear unpredictability, when we fear uncertainty, we should meditate on the causes of that fear, meditate on the causes of the instability, meditate on the causes of the impermanence, and realize and understand that the causes of that is karma. And meditate on the nature of the instability, meditate on the nature of our existence, which is impermanence. Meditate on the impermanence of our situation and of our existence, not just in the immediate period, not just within this lifetime itself, but at the point of death. Meditate on the lack of control we have over our rebirth. When we meditate on all of this and that fear arises, it should prompt us to actually double down on our practice. Why? Because if you're scared, do something about the fear instead of allowing that fear to paralyze us. And I believe I talked about this in the previous series, which is how fear is paralyzing and how we can overcome that fear and how we can use that energy of fear to create a beneficial result for us. So when you fear instability, meditate and think where the instability arises from. Meditate on the causes of the instability, meditate on the causes of that crisis. And when that fear arises, use that to double down on our practice, use that to become even more committed to our practice and more committed to our efforts to create merit and to create the causes for a good rebirth in a place where we are able to practice Dharma, in a place where we are even in more control, or where we are in even more control rather of, or better equipped to deal with things that are always changing. All right, so meditate on causes of instability, meditate on impermanence, meditate on the fact that another word for instability rather is actually impermanence, and that our existence, the fact that we are remaining in, the fact that we are beings existing in samsara, things are always going to be unstable, things are always going to be changing, things are always going to be impermanent. And if we really want to put an end to it once and for all, we need to create the causes. We need to create the merit to continue to take rebirth, to continue to take, to continue to be in conducive conditions where we can continue our practice, where we can focus more on our practice, so that we no longer have to experience this suffering of change that Buddha Shakyamuni talked about. Now, I see a question here from Joyce, which is not exactly related to this week's talk, but I will address it anyway. Her question is, how can we remove homeless stigma swiftly, like misconceptions of the character of a homeless person, and remove some of the causes and conditions that cause the crisis of homelessness? How can we remove homeless stigma swiftly? The fastest way to remove the stigma of ending swiftly actually is, if we wish to change people's minds about, in this case, homelessness, we personally need ourselves to be involved in the work, in activities. Just think about it. If you have two people, one person is constantly talking about how you can end homelessness, but they do nothing about it. Okay, what do they call it? Armchair commentators. I think it's called armchair commentators. But there's two people. One person is constantly talking about how to end homelessness, but they do nothing about it. They don't support food banks. They don't support soup kitchens. They don't look into causes of poverty. They don't try to improve educational opportunities for children and so on. If that person comes up to you and talks to you or tries to convince you that we should end the stigma of homelessness swiftly, are you more likely to listen to them, or are you more likely to listen to someone who is actually participatory in activities to end homelessness? So if someone, regularly goes to a soup kitchen every single week and regularly helps out, regularly volunteers, and then they come and tell you, actually, a homeless person is just like you. A homeless person is a human being. A homeless person is deserving of dignity, is deserving of kindness, is deserving of assistance. And I know that they're deserving of this because I have been involved with them. Who are you more likely to listen to? That's one. The second one, how can you end the stigma of homelessness more swiftly, is by teaching people to generate compassion. Maybe it cannot take place with a particular, in this case, homeless crisis immediately, but perhaps there is another cause that they identify with more strongly. For example, they may perhaps identify more strongly with animals. So fostering, nurturing, encouraging that seed of compassion within them using another cause. And as that seed of compassion grows, then helping them, using that to help them to understand why compassion towards someone who's homeless is necessary, is possible, is something that we should show. All right, so how can you how can you convince people, and how can you remove misconceptions, change misconceptions about the character of a homeless person? The only way to do that is through education. Are there going to be people who are going to dishearten you at times? Homeless individuals who are going to dishearten you at times, who are going to reinforce the stigma? Yes, there are going to be. But are there going to be people who are going to change your mind? Yes, there are. Why? Because the fact that somebody is homeless is a temporary status. It's not a defining characteristic of them. It's not a defining quality of them. A defining quality of someone is kindness, is compassion, is love. All right. A person who is homeless, that is not their defining character. That is just a temporary state that they are, for lack of a better word, residing in or currently experiencing. So how you can change or remove misconceptions of the character of a homeless person is by educating people who have said misconception, by exposing them to that kind of environment, to that kind of situation. And that is why Rinpoche always talked about exposing children in a, how do I put this? Controlled, in a controlled way, but basically exposing kids from a young age to different ways of life, to different ways of how people live, so that children from a young age are aware of this, and so they're not surprised by this, so that when they get exposure to how different cultures, to different ways of living, to different ideas, to different values, to different beliefs, that when they are older, they're more tolerant, they're more accepting, they are less judgmental. All right. How do you remove some of the causes and conditions that cause the crisis of homelessness? We can talk about specific instances. We can talk about, like, for example, making sure that kids receive a good education. For example, that making sure that children receive 3 square meals a day, which has been shown, to lead to better educational opportunities, to lead to remaining longer in the education system, and so on and all of that. We can talk about all of that, okay? Like specific instances, increasing job opportunities and all of that, training and all of that. But the fundamental key thing is how you remove the causes and conditions of a homeless crisis is compassion, kindness, That is always the answer to everything. Why do you want children to receive education, to stay or remain within the education system longer? Because it's out of kindness, because you don't want them to suffer in the future. Why is it that parents should expose their children to different cultures, to different ways of life, to different standards of living? Kindness, compassion, because you want your children to grow up to not be so sheltered, to be not so unexposed, to be more accepting, to have an open mind, to not be so narrow-minded. Why is it that you want to train people to equip them with better skills so that it widens their employability? Kindness, because you want them to have you want to equip them rather with skills that they can use or they can then implement to change their own lives. Why is it that you want to speak kindly to someone who's homeless? Why is it that you want to give food to them? Why is it that you want to provide better housing and so on? Kindness. So fundamentally, out of everything, you can talk about specific schemes, you can talk about specific plans, but the fundamental core thing for everyone's life improving is kindness and compassion. That should be our motivation to be of benefit, regardless of whether it's with homelessness, regardless of whether it's with stray animals and so on. All right. So Joyce, I hope that answered your question. But it was a very good question, because it is getting worse. I hate to say it, but the number of people who are suffering as a result of the current instability of our times is increasing. And it's not just, in the past. I'm speaking in the sense of Malaysia. I'm speaking in the sense of Malaysia. I don't have the current experience of homelessness in other countries, but I can say that in Malaysia, the demographic characteristics of people who are requesting for aid is changing. It used to be more in the sense of migrant workers coming in from the countryside and so on to the city, and or people getting cheated from jobs, that kind of thing. It used to be basically young men who are asking for help, and these days what we're finding is more families with young children, and also the older generation. Why? Because the main breadwinner of the house has lost their job as a result of the current instability of the employment market, the current instability of our times, basically. So yeah, it is changing, that situation. But thank you very much, Joyce, for opening up this topic of discussion, because it is something that all of us can see in front of us every single day. When we see something like that, when we see someone suffering like that, and we see that someone else is experiencing that form of instability, which is instability of home, instability of food, instability of shelter, if we are in a position to do so, we should definitely see what it is that we can do to help them. Whether it's a kind word, whether it's a smile, whether it's even just looking at someone and not averting our gaze when we're walking down the street because we just don't want to deal with it, or we don't want to see it, we don't want to acknowledge it. On our part, as Buddhists, as spiritual practitioners, all of these are moments when we can use to foster, how do I say this? To let that seed of compassion bloom within us, to not trample it down by ignoring the fact that it's happening. All right. Let me see who else has joined us this morning. I know if you guys are just tuning, you're literally like, why is she talking about homelessness when the title of this sharing is supposed to be dealing with instability and crisis? It's because someone asked the question. Good morning, James. Good morning, Caroline. Good morning, Phoebe. And there's someone here whose name is in Chinese. I'm so sorry. 我不会讲华语, so I can't read your name. But thank you very much for joining us this morning. Mary Turner Krieger, I'm so sorry if I can't mispronounce your last name. Mary asks, do you have a calendar? I would like to attend another time. Mary, what do you mean by calendar? If you mean like the schedule of programs for this show, I'm on live on the last Sunday of every month. All right, so same time, every last Sunday of every month. But the videos themselves, the actual videos themselves come out every single Sunday, 10 a.m. GMT plus 8. I swear by the time this whole schedule of programs is over, you guys will know that Malaysia is in GMT plus 8 time zone. All right. Oh, Kawi. Oh, hi, Sam. Hi. Hi. Nice to see you here. Thank you for joining us this morning. Sam is one of the people who regularly helps out with Kachar Soup Kitchen, which is our organization's charity arm, philanthropic arm. But Sam goes to volunteer at Kachar Soup Kitchen every single week without fail. She drives down to KL from Bentong, 45 minutes to an hour drive, to help consistently. All right, so thank you very much, Sam, for your continued volunteering and continued support. Even when things are really rough in the sense of like fewer volunteers and all that, because understandably people are fearful of going out to help at this time, Sam still goes. All right, so thank you very much, Sam. You're very welcome, Mary. I guess I'll see you every Sunday, right? Do you guys have any more questions? Let me see who else is here. You can ask anything at all. That is what this Sunday is open for, is to answer any questions. The reason why I give a short sharing beforehand is because I find that oftentimes people do have questions, but the questions don't immediately come to them unless it's prompted or unless something is raised, or maybe people are just shy and don't want to ask questions. But what Rinpoche always said to us was ask, because although we may feel that the question is silly, or although we may feel that the question is mundane or whatever, what we find is that oftentimes there is always someone else who's listening who also wants to know the same thing, but they themselves are too shy to ask. So out of compassion, we ask the question so that knowledge can be shared, so that there's a discussion, so that there's information that can be shared to help somebody else. All right, so out of compassion, we ask questions. So Rinpoche always encourages us to ask questions. Let me see, who else is here? All right, no more questions. So we will end for today. I did say I was going to try and keep it short. But if you do have anything that you wish to add, or if there is anything that you want to say, or if there is anything you want to ask, stick it in the comment section, and then I will type it out after the live stream. All right, because I know sometimes people don't really want to ask when the live stream is going on. I don't really know why. I have a big mouth, so I don't have a problem asking questions. But thank you guys very much for joining me this week. And also thank you very much for your continued support of the programs, not just my programs, but everyone else's, Pastor David's program, Pastor Nero's program, which is fantastic. His how-to series, you guys really should watch that, because it answers a lot of questions that people have frequently asked over the years. For example, how to take refuge, how to do prostrations, practice questions, So that series is fantastic because it allows you to keep revisiting the knowledge and to keep improving on our practice, all right? Even if it's something that you feel like you already know, watch it anyway as a refresher, because we find that over time, there are certain things that just lapse in our memory, all right? No, not good, not bad, it's just, it lapses in our memory. So it's good for us to keep watching the videos over and over again repeatedly to refresh our memory, to readjust our motivation, to improve upon our practice, because that's what we're here for, right? Is to learn and then to practice so that we can stop experiencing the instability and impermanence that characterizes our existence. All right. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me this week. And also thank you very much to the anonymous donor of today's sharing. Next month, I'm going to be answering questions that you guys have sent to me, including questions about why Tibetan Buddhist altars are so fancy. All right, why is it that there's so many things? Why is it that offerings are so extensive? Why is it that they're so colorful? All right, so I'm going to be answering those questions next month. But if there is a specific topic that you would like me to address, shoot me a message, and I will cover it in one of the videos. And if you don't want me to mention your name as the person who asked the question, that's fine. All right, just let me know. And also, please don't forget to do your Wesak Day offerings, because Wesak Day is coming up on May 26th. So 1 month away, exactly 1 month away. All right, and Wesak Day is the day that Buddha Shakyamuni was born, the day that Buddha Shakyamuni achieved enlightenment, and the day that he entered Parinirvana. And if you think about it, you know, talking about instability, talking about impermanence, talking about us having this lack of control over our lives. At our stage, we can barely plan what it is that we want to do next week. We can barely plan what it is that we want to do over the weekend, without our plans changing, without people cancelling on us, or, you know, FFK, like, as what they say in Cantonese. But at our stage, we can barely plan for these things, you know, because everything's so unstable, everything's always changing. But Buddha Shakyamuni could plan the day that he was born, he could plan the day that he became enlightened, and he could plan the day that he entered Parinirvana. And he planned it all for the exact same day. All right, so it must mean, you know, that that particular day is very, very special for some reason. So for Buddhists of all traditions, Wesak Day is one of the holiest and most auspicious days of the year, as evidenced by the fact that Buddha Shakyamuni chose that day to demonstrate those 3 acts. And on that day, on Wesak Day, any offerings that we make, any prayers that we recite, the merits that we generate from that day, the merits that we accumulate from that day is multiplied 100,000 times. All right. So don't miss this opportunity, which comes around once a year, to create merit, to create the causes for us to experience less instability and to experience fewer crises in the future. All right. So I will see you guys next week. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for everyone who has stayed till the end. All right. Any questions, stick them in the comment section of the live stream, and I will get back to you guys afterwards. All right. Thank you for joining me. And as ever, guys, have a great weekend, and don't forget to be kind to each other. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.